wanted to start by telling you guys a story. It's more of a personal story. When I was preparing, I intended on sharing it with you, not sharing it with the world, but I think this will have to do. When I was young, I think I was maybe 8 years old, we grew up in Egypt. I spent the first part of my childhood in Egypt, and my parents were very protective, and they wanted to make sure that they raised good kids. And they always protected us from the environment. And I was really into soccer, and I was getting good, and I said, Mom, I'm studying, I'm getting good grades, and I need to spend a little bit of time practicing and playing soccer with the street kids so I can get better. And just to give you an idea of the kind of person that was, what kind of kid I was, I want you to take a look at this picture. And in the middle, you'll see me with nice hair. I missed my nice hair. My mom looked at this picture and she said, what were you thinking? Like, before you take a class picture, how do you look like that? And she was like, look at Pierre. The guy on the bottom here is Pierre. She was like, look how nice he is. And I said, yeah, Mom, his name is Pierre. He has to look like this. Anyways, so my mom gave me permission. I played with the street kids. She said, as long as you keep your Christian values, you can go and you can do whatever you want. I went, and every day they used to curse so loud and so much. Every single play came with a curse. And this was the environment that I was surrounded in. And I kept my values. I never once uttered a single curse. One day, though, I came home, and as if all these curse words had bottled up inside of me, and they needed to come out. And not only did they need to come out, they needed to be validated, and they needed to be recorded. So I got one of those things. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this before. It's called a cassette player, or a recorder. And I recorded every single curse word I've ever heard in my life on side A. And then I flipped to side B, and I compounded the curse words. I must have recorded things that no one had ever heard in their lives. You know, things that involved fathers and dogs, mothers and donkeys, and all sorts of crazy stuff. But I'm sure you catch my drift. Anyways, I recorded it, and I stowed the tape away, and a couple of days later, my mom found it. And what happened later is only between me and my mom and no one else. But the reason why I'm telling you guys this story today is that conformity really gets to you. Even if on the outside it doesn't feel like you are getting sucked in and it feels like you're very protected, sometimes you're in an environment that it will penetrate so subtly and it will strike your core. And that's why we're all here today. The theme of this retreat comes from this verse, Romans 12:2, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And I want to unravel this with you today to see how this could pertain to the life of the mission. How are we not supposed to conform when it comes to mission? And I want to tackle this through 3 main points. 1, true and unbiased love, pure charity and justice. Anything that we do in mission has to be rooted and has to go through these 3 points. And if it doesn't, then it is not Christian charity. It is not Christian mission, and it conforms to every worldly and secular standard, which is what we're trying to avoid. By the way, I'm not going to insult your emotional intelligence by showing you a bunch of pictures of cute kids to try to get some sort of emotional energy out of you, but I couldn't resist. She was one of the kids at the refugee camps. Her name was Pisan, and she was obsessed with me. I'm kidding. I was really obsessed with her. Every day when I would arrive to this was in the refugee camp in in Athens in Greece. And every time when I would walk in, I would go and to her tent, and I would ask her mom if she's ready. And her mom was like, oh, she's still sleeping. And I would come in 5 minutes later. Is she up? She's like, oh, she's getting dressed. And her mom was getting really annoyed with me because, like, as if I was like stepping out of line or something. But I just wanted to show you guys because she's really dear to my heart. The first point that I want to illustrate with you guys is Christian compassion or love. And how do we not conform to love? In the world in general, there are basic units to everything. If you study biology, then you have to talk about the human cell. If you study chemistry, you have to talk about molecules. Physics, subatomic particles. So everything has a fundamental unit. that makes it up. And Christianity is no different. It is love that puts this all together. And if love is absent, then all of this is meaningless. So our only example, our primary example is always Christ. How did Christ really show us compassion? And in the New Testament, there's a couple of examples where it's mentioned that Christ was moved by compassion. I think it was 6 or 7 times. And the Greek translation, the original, actually means that he had physical pain in his stomach. It wasn't just something that he felt in his heart, but he had actual physical pain. That is how much Christ felt other people's struggle. And we're invited to do the same thing. We are not just, we're not just supposed to be here to pretend like we care or just have sympathy. We are actually supposed to feel the pain of others. We're not just doctors, and sometimes we forget that. We think that we are supposed to just act as a doctor and nothing else. But we are human beings first, and once we get rid of that, we can actually connect with people emotionally. Some people say, I would like to go, but I don't feel anything in my heart. I'm not moved. I have seen stuff really here, but it has never really shaken me to the core. What do I do? When we went to Greece, we had a couple of girls with us on the trip, and they started sharing. We had a sharing session, and after day 1, they said, we didn't feel what you guys were feeling. Or when we walked into the camp and you guys were like so moved by certain things, it didn't move us the way it did you guys. And then they started crying because they felt like they weren't being emotional enough, and it didn't make sense. But anyways, when we got to it and we actually got to the core, we realized that we are all triggered by different things, and we are not all supposed to react the same way to the same thing. And this is something that makes all of us unique. Sometimes when you walk in, you'll see something that is so gruesome that is going to rock your world. I remember day 2, the group hadn't arrived yet, and one of the women in the camp, she had lost her daughter. They took her daughter away because they thought that she was mentally ill and she could physically hurt her daughter. And she was literally banging her head against the wall. She cut a piece of glass and she slit her wrists, both of them, all in front of my eyes. And you can't see something like that and not be moved. A couple of days later, I saw them bringing a 4-year-old girl with blood in between her legs. And you can imagine why that could happen. And they had a few suspects. And the conditions in these camps are not to be taken lightly. Sometimes we see these things so many times that it doesn't move us and shake us the same way, but when you're confronted with the situation, it'll be very different. Even if you still feel like you don't feel anything, you have to give it a go, and you have to try. There's a quote by Mother Teresa that says, "Do little things with great love. And if you can't do them with great love, do them with little love. And if you can't do them with little love, do them anyways, because love grows with service." And this is fundamentally true. Sometimes in the beginning you see something that really doesn't speak to you, but the more you serve, the more you'll love. This is a picture of a paralyzed girl also in the camp. Her name was Khadija, and she was paralyzed, and her parents, I'm not sure if you can see it here, but if you look down, you'll see that there was a rope attached to her feet. They used to tie her not to the bed, to the radiator, because they didn't have beds. They tied them to the radiator because they didn't want her to just like crawl everywhere and just like pick up things and eat. So this is a human being that is tied every day of her life. And then when we went and we talked to the mom and we said we could actually report you, this is like, you have to take her downstairs to see some fresh air and breathe and see the sun. And then she started taking her daughter downstairs, and she completely became a different person because she's no longer locked in this room, and she can see the world like we see it. These are the conditions that, these are the things that you get to see when you step out of your comfort zone, and these are the situations that are out there. It's just sometimes we forget. And again, like I was telling you, we have different triggers and we have different roles. We had this doctor with us, Dr. Miriam from DC, and this lady, Mona, she could not connect with anyone but her. Every time she would feel something, she would come and hug her just like this. Miriam's Arabic was not that great, and Mona's English was non-existent, but they both got along emotionally very well. They could just hug it out every time, and it'll be okay. Mishmish and this little girl, whenever she would see Michelle, she would just leave everything in her hand and run to her. And she just connected. Some of us are good with kids. Some of us are good with adults. Some of us are good with women. Some of us are good with older men. We all have different roles and we have different triggers. So be open to trying new things. Don't just say, I don't feel it. You will feel something, I can assure you. You just give it a chance. This is Kareem. He was also helping set up a swimming pool for the kids, which is obviously they went crazy over this. And they played, they didn't want to get out from morning till evening, pretty much every day. Leaving Athens, so Athens was not a medical mission entirely, it was mostly just humanitarian, but then in Thessaloniki it was a medical mission. And the lady dressed in white on the left of the screen, her name is Rachel, she's a dental assistant who had never left the country before. She's 65 years old, she had never left the United States in her life. But since the refugee crisis, she couldn't shake it off. She felt like she had to do something about it personally, and then she couldn't sleep. One day she got up, she booked a ticket, didn't talk to anybody, didn't plan anything, and arrived in Thessaloniki, took a cab to one of the refugee camps, and she said, I'm here, is there any dental team that I can work with? They said, no, there's nobody here to work. So she ended up staying for 2 weeks, and on her last day was our first day there. The dental team arrived. And then we asked her, like, as she told us her story, we're like, what have you been doing for 2 weeks? She's like, I had a blast. I did everything else. I helped out as a nurse. I babysat. I helped with food. She allowed herself to be used in more than one capacity. I remember when I was in India a couple of years ago, and then we had a couple of doctor volunteers when they were asked to help out with some of the handiwork. They said, no, we're here as doctors. We're not doing anything else. And this lady, Rachel, exemplifies the opposite, the Christian love that, you know what, I will do anything that is needed to be done in order to show true love. This young lady here, her name is Carly, she's a pediatric nurse from the UK, looked to do a medical mission. At the time, there was no medical teams coming out to Greece. So she called the dental, she said, I know you guys are coming, can I come with you? She trained to be a dental assistant in 2 days, doesn't speak a word of Arabic, but as you can see, she had a blast. The patients loved her, everyone just had a great time. Love just knows no boundaries. When you have it in your heart, nothing is gonna stop you. She was obsessed with me, I tell you. The second component of nonconformity is charity. Okay, when we hear the word charity today, we think of we don't think of the true meaning of it. We think of corporate America charity, 10 cents of the dollar charity. We've lost the actual meaning of the word, and it's supposed to go far, far beyond that because the Bible is all about charity. The definition in the dictionary says the voluntary giving of help to those in need. Voluntary help and need. And to me, this picture really wraps it all up. This was taken in India, in Calcutta, in Mother Teresa's house, the home of the dying. And you can just see the compassion and the charity in this young lady caring for one of the dying women. I want to revert back and talk to you a little bit about the camp's living conditions. In Athens, basically, if you're unfamiliar with what happens, how the refugee process works, they used to make their way on land from Syria into Turkey, and then they would take a boat and go from Turkey to one of the Greek islands, Lesbos mainly, and then it was a short ride. It was maybe a 20-minute boat ride where a lot of them drown. I think the statistics were 10 to 15% of the boats drown. They pay $1,000 per person to be able to get on that boat just to cross a 20-minute boat ride. They get to Greece and they stay at this port in order to be processed. And last year I spoke to you guys about statistics in the Jordanian and Za'atari refugee camps in Jordan. But in Greece it is very different because people are convinced that this is a temporary situation. So it is utter chaos from every sense. There's no food, they eat once a day. The Yazidis that made it out there, the Yazidis are the Iraqis that were in Sanjari mountain, and basically they were surrounded by ISIS forces, and ISIS wanted to exterminate them as people. And ISIS waited for them for months down by the base of the mountain for them to come down, and the people didn't. They starved themselves sometimes to even death until like some humanitarian work arrived and the US and the UN would drop just some food by plane for them to eat until they were able to liberate them. But these are the people that made it to these camps, you know. There's so many issues because of identity and ethnicity. You have Afghanis and Syrians are always fighting each other every day because of just who this belongs to and who this belongs to. Showers are like communal showers, and women are always harassed. At night when they leave, one of the charities got all the women in the camp a whistle so that if she feels like she's being followed by a man or she's threatened, she can blow that whistle. Because obviously there's a lot of single guys who are also at these camps, and a lot of single women who are either widowed, their husbands died, or their husbands haven't yet made it to Syria, or they have already made it to Greece and passed. They went to Germany and they're waiting to bring their family along. So the conditions are really terrible. This is an example. On the left is where they are waiting at the port, small tents, and on the right is where they would wait in the camps. These were their homes. You can imagine that's hot in the summer, but you can imagine the Greek winters are rough. And in the winter, living in a tent like that, what can that do to you and your family? The work conditions in the camps were also a little bit difficult because in northern Greece, in Saloniki, there were 18 different refugee camps, and none of them had their own clinics. So as a team, we had to basically set up something similar to this so that we can see all the refugees that come in for help. And this equipment was very heavy to carry. All these bags we had to go back and forth with them from every camp. We would visit maybe 2 camps a day, and we have them on a schedule. So in a week, we can at least visit 14, most of them. Until one guy had a brilliant idea. There was one of the doctors who was working with me, she was leaving, and she was on her way back to the UK. And then she met this she met an engineer on a plane as she was waiting. He's Bulgarian, and he asked her what she was doing in Greece, and she told him about her work as a dentist and how much of a problem it was to be able to provide care in all these different camps. And he said, I have an idea, would you let me help? She said, yes, please. So the guy went and he bought, you know, in World War II, when the Russian army and the German army used to mobilize hundreds of miles and thousands of miles on foot, and it used to take days, they needed to have portable and mobile offices. So we get these containers that would become an office. You would unfold it, a big office, and you can fold it back up, put it on a truck, and ship it. So the guy bought one of these offices, plumbed it, put electricity, renewed the electricity because it was old, and put dental chairs inside, and set it up as a clinic, and sent it. He said, hey, this is my gift to you guys. You don't even need to worry about it. This is my contribution because I'm an engineer. That's what I do. I can think of a solution. We doctors can't think as well. And then I can make it work. So this man, the engineer, really did something completely out of the box. He saw a problem and he said, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to think of a way to fix it that is very unconventional. And honestly, to me, that is the Christian way of doing it. That is a charitable Christian way of doing it. Because Christ also did things out of the box. And when I ask myself that question, how did Christ do things out of the box? I mean, did you really have to multiply 5 loaves and 2 fish? Or, I mean, he could have multiplied money and gave it to the disciples and say, hey, go and buy some food. Or he could have made the people not hungry anymore. He did something out of the box. The wine and water. He could have just, had somebody deliver more wine from somewhere else. But he had to go for something that was completely unique and out of the box.